You're listening to School Counseling Simplified, a podcast with easy-to-implement strategies for busy school counselors. Here's your host, Rachel Davis from Bright Futures Counseling.
Hey listeners, let me let you in on a little secret. You don't have to stress about planning your class lessons, small groups, and individual sessions anymore. My school counseling membership program, Impact, is here to help. So, what do Impact members get? Monthly curriculum plans across all 3 tiers, SEL lessons, small groups, individual, and seasonal activities, step-by-step video implementation guides, bi-weekly Zoom coaching calls with me, and exclusive Facebook group community. This membership is designed for school counselors who want to deliver the best possible content to their students, but who also want to just press the easy button. You'll get access to monthly curriculum plans, resources, support, and community so you can deliver quality, engaging, life-changing counseling lessons to your kiddos. So what do you think? Are you ready to make an impact? Join today at stressfreeschoolcounseling.com/impact. Hey there, thanks for listening to another episode of School Counseling Simplified. So this week, I want to talk to you about how you can be a team player and collaborate with admin. So all month I've been talking about how you can collaborate with your stakeholders, and this week is all about your administrators, specifically your principal. Okay, so let's dive in. I have 6 things for you again. First up, plan together, but you lead the dance. So what I mean by that is you don't want to just come in hot with all your own ideas and not even touch base with what they had in mind, especially if it's your first year, a new school or something. So, or even if you're a recurring counselor, a returning counselor, you want to sit down with your admin and chat about your plan for the year. Plan it together. You know, what are you thinking? What do you have in mind? What are the needs here? And you may be thinking, well, it's November. What do you mean plan for my year? But you can do like a mid-year checkpoint. That's exactly what we're going to talk about in December on the podcast. So more on that later. But you can do a mid-year checkpoint to see, you know, what's been working, what's not working, and what we can do going forward. Now, what I mean by you lead the dance is you don't want to show up with a blank notepad and say, okay, what are we going to do this year? Like, you want to know, it's your counseling program, right? So you want to be in charge. You want to have like an idea, and you're the counselor. You know better, you know the ASCA model better. And honestly, you know better than the principal when it comes to counseling, what the needs are. I mean, this is your background. It's your forte, right? So you want to lead the dance. You know, this is what I had in mind, and you want to like share your ideas, get support for them, but again, share your ideas. But it's nice to have support for them rather than you just doing things on your own and being like, I hope this is cool. So take that time, and I think your admin will really appreciate, you know, the effort you put forward saying, hey, can we set up a time to meet? I want to go over this, this, and this. You could even make this like a reoccurring thing. So maybe, you know, you have a monthly meeting or a weekly meeting, something like that. I had on my counseling log, I had an admin who wanted to know what I was up to. I was a little annoyed with it first because this is like later on in my counseling career, and I had never done this before. I'd always just kind of had like trust, but these were new administrators. They ended up not working out. They ended up like leaving before the school year was over. But anyways, they were new administrators, and they were like, we want to know what you're up to in counseling, what you're doing with the kids. So I had a counseling log. Of course, I kept it really confidential and brief, but it was just a shared Google Doc, or a Google sheet, so they could just see who I was seeing, how often, and like, you know, a base of what we were talking about. So that was a cool way to keep them in the loop without us having to like physically sit down or a back and forth email yo-yo. Okay, and number 2. School-wide initiatives. So we talked about this in the podcast last month. Go back and listen to that episode if you didn't already. But you can plan those school-wide initiatives together. So those same principals I was just talking about, they were really big on growth mindset. It was really important to them to focus on growth mindset, which I love growth mindset, and I usually do like 1 or 2 growth mindset lessons throughout the year, but they really wanted me to have like a lens of growth mindset in every lesson. So at first I was like, that sounds weird. I don't know. Maybe I'll just do like 1 growth mindset lesson. But to them, it was really important to have it like trickled in throughout the year, which I see the benefits for sure. So what I did was I went through and, you know, talked about the lessons I had planned, and then I had to kind of pivot, like, well, how can you look at empathy with a growth mindset? Or how can you look at cooperation with a growth mindset. So it actually made it a little challenging for me to add that piece to my lessons. And it was just a really cool way for us to focus on that school-wide initiative together of growth mindset. So I was able to support them in that. So be willing, a give and take. It's a dance for sure. But you want to make sure that you have these school-wide initiatives planned. So chat with them, hey, what's the focus you want to focus on this year? How can I support you in doing that? Okay, number 3, suggest alternatives to discipline. So you have to remember, again, you're the one with the counseling background and they have the administrative leadership background. So maybe, and I know a lot of times discipline falls on the VP, but if you're elementary, maybe you don't have a VP. But, just keep them up to date on things, on alternatives to discipline. Maybe you could all go to like a restorative practices training together, or you could just portray a situation in a different way, maybe they hadn't thought about before, just to kind of always advocate for our students. And we're all there for the best interest of the student. But sometimes if they're constantly in that disciplinarian role, they kind of forget to see the other side of how it could be fixed. And what I like to encourage principals to do is, and my one principal did a great job at this, instead of being like, she's the bad guy, I'm the good guy, instead of it being like, oh, you're going to go to the principal and get in trouble, but then you'll come to me after and we'll talk about how you could have done it differently next time. That's not really fair, right? That's always painting the principal as the bad guy and me as the good guy. So instead, my principal would like play games with them or eat lunch with them or do like a fun thing with them. They could like earn some reward time to spend with her. And she was really cool. So the kids liked spending time with her. She was actually a former teacher. But yeah, so they would, get to spend that quality time with her. And so she had to build a bond with them outside of just being like in a disciplinarian role. And I think that was really effective when those same kids, she would take time to spend time with the kids who were having a lot of problems. And I think it really made a difference because then later when they would see her, if they were in trouble, they already had a good relationship with her. It wasn't just all negative all the time. And then, of course, I was there to support as well and have those conversations on what coping skills they could have used, what they could have done differently to resolve their conflict, using I statements instead of lashing out, something like that. But it was just really nice that she got to have a positive piece too. It wasn't just all like disciplinarian. So that's an idea you could give your principal that maybe they hadn't even thought of yet. Okay, for the next one, update them on the latest counseling trends. So they, likely don't know. They probably have a baseline of what counseling is and, what your job and role is, but you want to always be advocating for your role, of course, but also it's fun. Give them an update like, hey, I just read this book. You might find it interesting, or I forwarded you this article on this, or ask us focusing on this month. Update them on the latest counseling trends. Let them know like, hey, now we use this terminology, or now we focus on this, or, different things like that. I think that's really important, and you can do it in a fun way. Again, we don't want to give them like a laundry list of to-dos. Like we don't want to do that, as I was mentioning in the teacher episode a couple weeks ago. But you do just want to help them feel prepared. They'll probably find it interesting. Again, everyone has the kids' best interest in mind here. So that's always a fun one. And number 5 is to be proactive. So it's better for you to give a proactive voluntary update versus a check-in. So whenever you're thinking about your admin, you're likely thinking about them coming to an observation, which is like cringeworthy, right? And I've been at schools where I did have them and then I didn't have them, or it was like a little different than the teacher's observations due to confidentiality and stuff. But they would, pop in on a class lesson. It kind of throws you off your guard. And, of course, every time they come in, it's like a hot mess. That's just the nature of it, right? But instead, you want to get ahead of it. So instead of just waiting for that random check-in and being kind of creeped, what can you do instead? Well, you can proactively tell them updates. So like I mentioned, using that counseling log, have a weekly meeting. If you see them in the hall or at lunch or something, like, hey, I wanted to give you an update on these few kids. Do you have a minute? Keep them in the loop. They'll be really appreciative. And then they don't have to think like, oh, what's the counselor up to? I haven't heard from her in forever. Or I haven't seen her. What is she doing? I mean, talk about job security. If you're constantly telling them all the differences you're making and how these kids are improving, and the kids who aren't improving too, obviously, we want to just, give the whole picture. But if you're showing the value that your services are providing, that's the best way to advocate for your role and to keep them in the loop simultaneously. And for number 6, you probably guessed it, empathize. So again, you a lot of times the principal is portrayed as the bad guy, like I mentioned before, if they're in that disciplinarian role. And they have a lot on their plate. Like, they're not just worried about you. They have all the teachers to manage, parents, the kids, just the school board, their, superintendent. They have a lot on their plate. So you want to empathize with them. Again, try to keep things simple and easy. You want your interactions with them to be like a breath of fresh air. Like, oh my gosh, here's our counselor. She's going to share more amazing things that she's doing. And she's so independent and awesome. She doesn't need a lot from me. She's just giving me the updates. And I'm here to support her if she needs it. That's kind of the relationship that I like to have with my principal. Okay, so that one I hope you find helpful, guys. I would love to know how you collaborate with your principal. It's such an important relationship, and it's really nice if you have like a really smooth relationship there. It makes everything easier, and it's just a really cool way to connect. So I hope you found that helpful. Leave me some feedback at Bright Futures Counseling on Instagram. I'd love to hear from you, see what you think about these episodes. Or, of course, you can always leave us a review on the podcast as well. Next week, we're taking off because it is Thanksgiving. So I hope you enjoy the time with your families and your little break from school. And then we will meet back that last week in November to chat about how you can be a team player when it comes to our students, finally. All right, talk to you then.
Thanks for listening to School Counseling Simplified. You can find the links from today's episode in the show notes. If you'd like to connect with Rachel, she's on Instagram and Teachers Pay Teachers at Bright Futures Counseling. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes of School Counseling Simplified. Talk to you next week.